Imagine a world where power was reserved almost exclusively for men. Yet a woman not only stepped into that world but completely reshaped it. This is the story of Empress Wu Zetian, 624 to 705 AD, the only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor in her own right. Rising from humble beginnings, Wu Zetian navigated palace intrigues, ruthless rivals, and political conspiracies to claim the Dragon Throne. Her reign was marked by intelligence, ambition, and controversy, a legacy that continues to fascinate historians and storytellers alike. Now, let's delve into the extraordinary life of the woman who dared to rewrite the rules of power in ancient China. In ancient China, during a time when dynasties ruled and rivers of blood flowed for power, a girl was born whose name would become immortal in the pages of history. Her name was Wu Zetian. She was born into a modest family, but within her burned an ambition that would eventually erupt. At that time, the Tang dynasty was in power, one of the most prosperous and culturally rich periods of China. People were immersed in poetry, art, and culture, yet the shadows of conspiracy and intrigue always hovered over the realm of power. Wu Zetian was born into a relatively ordinary family, but it was not completely ordinary. Her father, Wu Shihua, was an official in the government, which allowed Wu Zetian access to education and cultural knowledge from a young age. She was not only beautiful, but also highly intelligent, surprising everyone with her sharp mind. Even as a child, she had begun learning horsemanship, poetry, and political thinking. At that time, women in China had very limited roles. They were rarely given significant positions in the court. But Wu Zetian was different. She knew deep in her heart that she would not just be a woman. She wanted to become the center of power. By the age of 14, her beauty and intellect had reached the royal palace. The emperor of the Tang dynasty, Taizong, noticed her and summoned her to the court. At that time, any girl entering the palace was as if destiny itself had opened a door for her. Yet this path was far from easy. The palace was filled with hundreds of concubines and consorts, each vying for the emperor's attention. Beauty alone was not enough. Intelligence and the ability to navigate political schemes were essential. Wu Zetian entered the palace and began to understand the complex workings around her. She knew that gaining the emperor's favor was not enough. She had to establish influence among the ministers, advisors, and other women as well. Emperor Taizong was a powerful and wise ruler. Wu Zetian served him diligently, reading and learning about history and politics. Even the emperor began to appreciate her intelligence. But her destiny took a pivotal turn when Emperor Taizong fell ill and eventually passed away. According to tradition, after the emperor's death, his concubines were either executed or sent to Buddhist monasteries to live as nuns for the rest of their lives. Wu Zetian was sent away to a monastery. This could have ended the dreams of any ordinary woman. But Wu Zetian was not ordinary. Even in the monastery, her ambition remained alive. She resolved that one day she would return to the palace, not merely return, but claim power herself. A few years later, Taizong's son, Gaozong, became emperor. He had remembered Wu Ziqian's beauty and intellect, and upon ascending the throne, he summoned her back to the palace. This was the turning point of Wu Ziqian's life. No longer just a concubine, she gradually won Gaozong's trust through her intelligence and careful strategy. She began advising him on state matters. Over time, she gained so much influence that no major decision was made without her counsel. Other concubines and ministers grew jealous and fearful, plotting against her, but Wu Ziqian was not easily stopped. She identified her enemies and removed them one by one. It is said that she even manipulated family members when they became obstacles to her path. She was ruthless, yet brilliant. As Emperor Gaozong's health declined, Wu Ziqian began making critical decisions on her own. She enacted reforms for the peasants, reorganized taxation, and improved administration. She promoted art, literature, and Buddhism, commissioning temples and statues that would immortalize her legacy. Yet her ruthlessness was also widely known. She spared no one who opposed her. People began to fear her, but she remained unstoppable. Eventually, after controlling the throne through her sons for a period, Wu Ziqian declared herself emperor. She established the Zhou dynasty, replacing the Tang, and took the imperial title. She was no longer merely a woman. She was the ruler of all China. This unprecedented achievement shocked the traditional society, proving that a woman could wield power equivalent to any man. Her reign was far from easy. There were rebellions, conspiracies, and constant threats, but Wu Ziqian triumphed each time. She rewarded talent and loyalty, removed corrupt officials, and strengthened the military to protect her empire. Her rule was also culturally vibrant. Poets, artists, and scholars flourished under her patronage. Her policies ensured justice, prosperity, and stability in the empire. Even in her later years, Wu Ziqian remained deeply involved in governing. She meticulously arranged succession plans to stabilize the state after her death. Finally, she passed away, leaving behind a strong, organized, and culturally rich empire. Her story remains one of the most remarkable in world history, a woman who defied societal norms and shaped the destiny of a nation. Wu Ziqian teaches us that ambition, intelligence, and courage can transform the seemingly impossible into reality. As Emperor Gaozong's health deteriorated, Wu Ziqian took full advantage of the opportunity. She had built a strong network of supporters within the palace, placing loyal officials in high positions and removing those who opposed her, either through exile or execution. Gradually, fear of Wu Ziqian spread throughout the court. Those who had once considered her a powerless woman now bowed before her authority. She began implementing significant reforms in the empire. Wu Ziqian restructured the tax system, alleviated excessive burdens on peasants, and introduced policies to improve the lives of ordinary people. She demanded that officials act justly, punishing corruption swiftly and without compromise. While these measures instilled fear among her ministers, they also demonstrated her administrative brilliance. Culturally and religiously, Wu Ziqian's reign was transformative. She promoted Buddhism, commissioned new temples and monumental statues, and supported scholars and artists. Music, literature, and the arts thrived within the palace. She even established extensive Buddhist libraries to preserve knowledge for future generations. In matters of military and strategy, she actively ensured the security of China's borders. Whenever threats arose, she responded decisively, strengthening the army and navy. Her ability to combine political cunning with strategic foresight made her rule exceptionally stable, even in times of potential unrest. Wu Ziqian's ruthlessness and skill in court intrigues became legendary. She dealt firmly with her enemies, sometimes executing them outright, and other times using subtle methods to remove them from power. Her ambition and determination allowed her to maintain an unshakable grip on authority. While some historians viewed her as cruel, others recognized her as a symbol of true power and statecraft. During her reign, she undertook numerous initiatives. Administrative reforms emphasizing meritocracy and accountability. Tax and land system reorganizations to improve economic stability. Policies aimed at the welfare of peasants and the common people. Cultural and religious patronage, especially of Buddhism. Strengthening military forces and securing borders. Strategic control over court rivals and conspiracies. Despite her public achievements, her personal life remained complex. She made difficult decisions regarding family members, including her own children, because power often came before personal affection. These private struggles illustrate that the life of a historical ruler is never just about public glory, but also the intricate challenges of personal relationships. Wu Ziqian's story demonstrates that ambition, intelligence, and perseverance can transform an individual's destiny. Her influence on politics, culture, and society was felt for decades after her death. She broke through the gender barriers of her time and established herself as the first, and only, woman to rule China as emperor. Her life remains an enduring lesson in courage, strategy, and the pursuit of greatness. As Wu Ziqian grew older, her experience and wisdom deepened. Throughout her reign, she faced numerous rebellions and conspiracies, yet each time she overcame them with careful planning and shrewd strategy. Her hold over the palace was unchallenged, and it became impossible for anyone to oppose her openly. She understood that power depended not only on strength and fear, but also on intelligence, foresight, and the ability to manipulate events. She continued implementing crucial administrative reforms. Officials were appointed based on merit and loyalty, while those found guilty of corruption were swiftly removed. Her policies strengthened the economic framework of the empire, improved governance, and ensured justice for ordinary citizens. Her firm yet effective approach earned her the respect of the populace while instilling fear among the court and rival nobles. Wu Zetian's support of culture and religion remained a hallmark of her reign. She championed Buddhism, commissioned grand temples, and encouraged scholars and artists to flourish. The palace became a center of literature, art, and music. She actively promoted the study of Buddhist texts and established extensive libraries to preserve knowledge for generations to come. In terms of military strategy, Wu Zetian remained vigilant. She oversaw the army and navy, securing the empire's borders and preventing foreign invasions. Her combination of political cunning and strategic oversight ensured stability throughout her empire, even in the face of potential threats. Her methods of maintaining power were both legendary and feared. Opponents were either eliminated directly or subtly removed from influence. Her unwavering ambition allowed her to maintain complete control over the court. While some historians regard her actions as ruthless, others view them as the mark of a decisive and capable ruler. Throughout her reign, Wu Zetian strengthened governance through merit-based appointments, reformed land and taxation systems to ensure fairness and efficiency, introduced policies to improve the lives of peasants and common citizens, promoted art, literature, and Buddhism extensively, expanded and strengthened military defenses, strategically neutralized rivals and controlled palace conspiracies. Even in her personal life, Wu Zetian faced difficult challenges. She made harsh decisions concerning her family, including her children, to protect and secure her rule. Her private struggles highlight that great rulers often navigate both public and personal complexities simultaneously. In her final years, she meticulously organized succession to ensure stability after her death. She left the empire well-structured and strong, proving that women could wield power on a scale equal to any man. Her story endures as a testament to ambition, intelligence, and courage. Wu Zetian's reign reshaped Chinese history, demonstrating that vision, determination, and strategic skill can overcome even the most entrenched societal barriers. Her life teaches that greatness is achieved through relentless pursuit of one's goals, careful planning, and bold decision-making. Wu Zetian remains a symbol of extraordinary power and resilience, leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire historians and admirers around the world. Wu Zetian's early ambitions had blossomed into a reign of unprecedented authority. She had risen from a young girl in a modest family to the supreme ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the world. Her palace was not only a center of political power but also a hub of cultural, intellectual, and spiritual activity. Scholars and poets flocked to her court, and her patronage of the arts ensured that literature, painting, and music flourished. Temples and monumental statues were constructed under her direction, cementing her legacy in both the physical and cultural landscape of China. Her path to power, however, had been paved with careful calculation and ruthlessness. Many rivals, both within her family and among the court officials, were neutralized with precision. She employed spies and informants to uncover plots before they could develop, turning potential threats into opportunities for further consolidation of power. Through a combination of persuasion, manipulation, and force, Wu Zetian maintained control over the empire while projecting an image of benevolence and justice. Throughout her reign, Wu Zetian faced continuous challenges. Rebellions arose from regional governors, military commanders, and ambitious nobles. Each time, she responded decisively, using both military strength and strategic diplomacy. She restructured the empire's governance to minimize corruption and maximize efficiency, ensuring that the bureaucracy operated smoothly even under her absolute control. Her policies extended beyond mere administration. They affected the daily lives of her people. She introduced programs to improve agriculture, reduce famine, and ensure fair taxation, thereby strengthening the social fabric of the empire. Wu Zetian's influence extended into the intellectual sphere as well. She sponsored the compilation of histories, encouraged the study of Confucian and Buddhist texts, and promoted education for capable individuals, regardless of their social background. Her court became a center of learning and innovation, and her reforms created opportunities for talented people to rise based on merit rather than birth. Despite her achievements, her rule was marked by fear and controversy. Her relentless pursuit of power and uncompromising approach to rivals made her a figure of awe and dread. The historical record speaks of her cunning, her decisiveness, and sometimes her cruelty. She made no compromises when it came to securing her authority, and her enemies often faced exile or death. Yet these very traits enabled her to survive and thrive in a world dominated by men and rigid social norms. Her personal life, like her political life, was complex and calculated. She balanced her role as a mother with her ambitions, using her children strategically to secure succession while maintaining ultimate control. Her ability to navigate these familial dynamics reflected her extraordinary intelligence and foresight. In the final years of her reign, Wu Zetian focused on solidifying her legacy. She prepared the empire for a smooth transition after her death, ensuring that administrative systems, succession plans, and cultural institutions were stable and enduring. She delegated responsibilities to trusted officials while continuing to oversee critical decisions personally. Even in her last days, she was deeply involved in the affairs of state, demonstrating that true leadership is measured not by age but by continued engagement and vision. When Wu Zetian passed away, she left behind a China that was stronger, more organized, and culturally richer than it had been before her rule. Her name became immortal in Chinese history as the first and only woman to rule as emperor. Her life exemplifies how ambition, intelligence, strategic thinking, and resilience can overcome societal limitations and transform history itself. Wu Zetian's legacy is multifaceted. She is remembered for her extraordinary political acumen, her contributions to culture and religion, and her ability to wield absolute power with skill and vision. Her life story continues to inspire generations, proving that determination and intellect can achieve what many deem impossible. Her reign reshaped the course of Chinese history, leaving an indelible mark on governance, culture, and society that endured long after her death. The birth of a queen. The year was 1326, and the kingdom of Naples shimmered like a jewel on the blue waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea. It was a land of sunlit hills, golden churches, and bustling markets filled with the scent of spices and sweet wines. Ships from faraway lands, Spain, France, the East, sailed into its harbors, bringing silk, silver, and stories of distant kingdoms. And in the heart of this vibrant land stood the royal palace, a fortress of marble and dreams. Tall towers rose against the sky, their flags dancing in the wind. Inside its walls, power whispered in every corridor. It was here, in this palace, that a child was born, a girl who would one day rule, love, fight, and fall. Her name was Joanna. She was the first granddaughter of King Robert of Naples, a wise and aging ruler who loved books and music more than war. The court celebrated her birth with grand feasts, golden goblets overflowing with wine, and musicians playing sweet melodies under the glowing chandeliers. But behind the music and laughter, politics stirred like a silent storm. The early shadows of power. Joanna grew in silk, surrounded by tapestries that told tales of ancient heroes. Her nursery was filled with carved toys and books bound in leather. Nurses hummed lullabies as sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the marble floor in shades of ruby and gold. But even as a child, Joanna was not like other girls. She had eyes that seemed to ask questions, bright, deep, and full of thought. She loved to wander through the palace gardens, her little shoes crunching on the gravel paths as she listened to the fountains whisper and the birds sing in the orange trees. Her mother often watched her from a distance and whispered, "She is meant for greatness." But greatness in Naples was never simple. It came wrapped in danger. The court of Naples. The court was a stage of glitter and masks, where every smile hid a secret and every gift carried a price. Nobles in silk robes bowed low before King Robert, but their eyes flickered with ambition. Priests walked in solemn lines, whispering prayers, yet plotting alliances with foreign kings. King Robert, wise and kind, loved Joanna dearly. He would often take her on his knee and tell her stories of saints and warriors. But even as he smiled at his granddaughter, the king worried. He had no surviving sons, only granddaughters. And in a world ruled by men, this was a dangerous weakness. So plans were made. Alliances forged. Letters sealed with wax and sent across mountains and seas. And one day, when Joanna was barely a child, her fate was sealed. A betrothal decided. On a winter morning, when the sea was grey and the wind carried the scent of salt and storms, a council gathered in the royal hall. The king sat on his carved throne, his robe heavy with gold embroidery. Around him stood dukes, bishops, and knights, their voices low, their eyes sharp. "We must secure Naples," a one lord said. "The throne cannot fall into foreign hands." "Joanna will be queen one day," the king replied. "She must have a husband strong enough to defend her and wise enough to rule beside her." And so it was decided. Joanna would marry Andrew of Hungary, a boy prince from the royal house of Anjou. The news spread through the palace like fire. Some whispered blessings. Others whispered curses. For the marriage would bring Hungarian influence into Naples, a move that pleased some and angered others. Joanna was too young to understand. When her mother told her of the betrothal, she only tilted her head and asked softly, "Will he like my white horse?" Her mother smiled faintly. "Yes, child. He will like everything about you." But behind that smile, her mother's heart was heavy. Childhood dreams. As the years passed, Joanna grew into a young girl of grace and spirit. She loved the sea, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks. Often she would ride her white horse along the palace gardens, her golden hair streaming in the wind, her laughter ringing like silver bells. She studied languages, music, and the art of ruling. Tutors praised her quick mind and gentle manner. But sometimes, when she sat alone by her window, watching the sunset turn the sky to fire, she felt a strange weight in her chest. She knew her life was not her own. The arrival of Andrew. The day finally came when Andrew arrived in Naples. The palace gates opened to a procession of horsemen in shining armor, their banners fluttering like flames. Trumpets blared. Nobles bowed. And at the center rode a boy with bright eyes and a proud smile, the Prince of Hungary. Joanna stood in the great hall, her gown shimmering like morning dew. She was 14, slender and radiant, her heart thudding in her chest. When Andrew stepped before her, she curtsied, and he bowed, their eyes meeting for the first time. "Welcome to Naples, my lord," as she said softly. "And to you, my lady," he replied, his voice young but confident. In that moment, the court watched, and history shifted. Early days of Joanna and Andrew. The first weeks of Andrew's stay in Naples were filled with ceremonies and feasts. The halls of the palace echoed with music, laughter, and the clinking of golden goblets. Courtiers whispered and watched the young couple closely. Some admired Joanna's poise, others envied her beauty. Joanna, despite being young, noticed everything. She noticed the eyes that lingered too long on her gown, the murmurs of nobles plotting for influence, and the quiet smiles of women who wanted to see her fail. Her grandmother often reminded her, "Remember, Joanna, in a palace, every smile can hide a dagger." Andrew was polite but distant. He had been raised with the lessons of war and diplomacy, and he did not yet know how to navigate the intricate world of Neapolitan politics. He admired Joanna's grace and intelligence, but sometimes found her quiet strength intimidating. One afternoon, Joanna and Andrew walked in the palace gardens, the air filled with the scent of blooming roses. "Do you like Naples?" Joanna asked, picking a flower and twirling it between her fingers. "It is beautiful," Andrew replied, eyes scanning the city below. "But it is not home. My home is far across mountains and rivers." Joanna nodded. "Perhaps, one day, it will feel like home." Their bond grew slowly, built on politeness, curiosity, and shared moments of solitude. They spent hours walking along the terraces, learning about each other's world. Joanna taught Andrew about the gardens, the secret paths through the palace, and the legends of Naples. Andrew shared stories of Hungary, of distant castles, and battles that shaped his youth. Yet, even as friendship blossomed, Joanna sensed a shadow. Courtiers whispered of threats from abroad, of plots against the crown, and of enemies who would not hesitate to strike. Naples, she realized, was a kingdom of beauty and danger alike. The court whispers. In the evenings, the council gathered. Lords and bishops discussed trade, war, and alliances. Joanna often sat nearby, listening carefully. She could hear the subtle tones of threat in their voices. One day, a trusted adviser whispered to her, "Your Highness, not all who kneel before you are loyal. Some wait for a single mistake to claim your crown." Joanna's eyes hardened. She realized that she was no longer just a child playing in the gardens. She was a queen in training, and every step she took would be watched, judged, and possibly used against her. Even Andrew began to understand the danger surrounding them. At night, in the quiet of their chambers, he confided, "I did not expect a kingdom to be so, alive with whispers." Joanna smiled faintly. "It is alive because it is not ours to control. We can only survive, Andrew. And perhaps, one day, we can rule wisely." The first signs of doom. As months passed, tensions grew. Hungary sent envoys to Naples, demanding influence over the young couple. Some nobles began favoring Andrew, seeing him as a stronger ruler. Others supported Joanna, fearing that too much Hungarian control would weaken Naples. One evening, while Joanna studied maps of her kingdom in the candlelight, a message arrived. The seal of Hungary was unmistakable. She broke it open and read the words carefully. "The crown of Naples is not entirely yours. Remember, your husband's family watches. Every action will be judged." Joanna felt a chill. Even at her young age, she understood the meaning. Her life would never be her own. The palace walls that had once felt safe now seemed like a cage. That night, she confided in her grandmother. "I do not feel free here, Nanner. Every step I take is watched. Even Andrew, he is cautious, but he cannot see all of it." Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. "Joanna, you must learn quickly. Not all battles are fought with swords. Some are fought with silence, patience, and the courage to stand alone." And with those words, Joanna felt the first true weight of her destiny. She was not just a child or a bride. She was a future queen of Naples, and the kingdom would demand everything from her. The royal wedding and court intrigue. The spring of 1343 arrived with the scent of blooming orange blossoms and the promise of new beginnings. The city of Naples was alive with color and music. Streets were draped in banners of gold and crimson. Merchants sold sweet pastries and exotic spices, while children ran alongside horses, waving miniature flags. In the palace, preparations for the royal wedding consumed every corner. Joanna, now 17, moved through the halls like a queen already in training. Her gown was woven with threads of gold, and pearls shimmered in her hair. Every detail of the ceremony had been planned for months, every ribbon, every flower, every note of the music. The day of the wedding arrived with perfect sunshine. Courtiers and nobles filled the grand hall, their eyes glittering with excitement and calculation. Ambassadors from Hungary, France, and neighboring Italian states arrived, their presence a reminder that this union was not just a marriage, it was a political alliance, a delicate balancing act of power and diplomacy. Joanna stood at the altar, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. She looked at Andrew, who stood opposite her, tall and poised, yet clearly nervous beneath his polished exterior. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world outside the palace seemed to vanish. The ceremony was long and elaborate, filled with prayers, chants, and solemn vows. When the crown of Naples was placed upon Joanna's head, a hush fell over the hall. Some whispered admiration, others whispered envy. The weight of the crown was heavy, not just with gold and jewels, but with expectation, responsibility, and the unseen threat of betrayal. The first night. That evening, in the quiet of the bridal chamber, Joanna and Andrew finally had a moment alone. The room was filled with soft candlelight, silk curtains swaying gently in the warm evening breeze. Andrew spoke first, his voice low and uncertain. "I never thought I would marry someone as remarkable as you, Joanna." Joanna gave a small smile, her hands clasped together. "And I never thought marriage would feel like standing on the edge of a cliff." He laughed softly, but there was tension behind his eyes. Joanna shook her head. "I fear what I must become, a queen who cannot afford weakness. And I fear the enemies who already plot in the shadows." Andrew reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We will face them together, he promised. But Joanna's gaze wandered to the window, to the city below, where lights flickered like distant stars. Deep inside, she knew that some battles she would have to fight alone. Whispers in the court. The days after the wedding brought no peace. Courtiers watched every move of the young queen, scrutinizing her gestures, her words, her alliances. Hungarian nobles whispered of influence and authority, subtly undermining Joanna's decisions. Naples' own nobles eyed her closely, some loyal, some hungry for power. One evening, during a feast in the Grand Hall, a messenger arrived with a letter from Hungary. The seal was unmistakable, the writing formal but threatening. Joanna read the words silently. Your reign is delicate. Remember, the crown of Naples is not yours alone. Andrew's family expects obedience. Step out of line, and consequences will follow. Joanna's hands trembled slightly as she folded the letter. She handed it to her grandmother, who read it with narrowed eyes. Your Highness, her grandmother whispered, this is the first of many tests. Learn to navigate these waters carefully. Joanna nodded, understanding fully that her life had changed forever. From this day on, she would be queen not just by title, but by will, intelligence, and courage. Tensions between Joanna and Andrew. Even with their affection growing, Andrew and Joanna faced constant pressure from outside. Hungarian advisors sought to control the young prince, pushing him to make decisions that would undermine Joanna's authority. At times, they whispered to Andrew, the crown is yours too, Prince. You must assert your authority. Joanna noticed the subtle glances, the pauses in conversation, the pressure building around them. One night, she confronted Andrew in the gardens, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. Do you not trust me? She asked quietly. Andrew looked away. It is not trust, it is caution. My family, they have expectations. I do not want to betray them. Joanna's eyes flashed with determination. And do you not see that I am the queen? That Naples belongs to me. Every whisper, every plot, they will use you if you do not stand with me. Andrew remained silent, conflicted. Joanna turned away, her cloak brushing the grass. She realized then that love in a palace was never simple, and loyalty was a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. Foreshadowing tragedy. As months passed, threats from Hungary became louder. Envoys arrived daily, reminding Naples of their power and demanding influence. Courtiers plotted quietly, testing the young queen's resolve. The city itself seemed to sense the tension. The markets were quieter, the streets patrolled more heavily, the air thick with whispered rumors. Joanna spent hours alone, walking the terraces, staring at the Tyrrhenian Sea, trying to gather her thoughts. She knew that her life, and Andrew's, was now tied to politics, alliances, and danger. Every smile in court could hide a dagger. Every gesture could be used against her. And in her heart, she felt the first shadow of fear. Not for herself, but for the life they were building together. Because in Naples, happiness for a queen was always temporary. The young queen finds her strength. Weeks passed after the wedding, and the palace settled into a rhythm, though tension lingered like smoke in the air. Joanna learned quickly that being a queen was not about smiling for ceremonies or wearing fine gowns. It was about commanding respect, sensing danger, and standing firm even when those around her doubted. She began holding private councils with trusted advisors, listening carefully to reports about the city, the markets, and the nobles. Some reports were troubling. Certain lords whispered in corners, questioning Andrew's rule, while others subtly undermined her decisions. Joanna noticed the pattern immediately. A simple oversight or hesitation could be twisted into a plot against her. One afternoon, while reviewing the city's finances with her grandmother, she asked, "Do they think me weak?" Her grandmother shook her head. "They think you inexperienced. But experience comes with time, and courage comes from knowing what must be done." Joanna resolved to act. She began attending audience sessions with citizens, merchants, and minor nobles, asking questions that revealed loyalty or deception. She studied alliances carefully, noting which families could be trusted and which might betray her when the opportunity arose. Slowly, she built a network of loyalty that extended beyond the royal household. Andrew's growing conflicts. Andrew, meanwhile, struggled with the pressures of being a foreign prince in Naples. The Hungarian advisers constantly reminded him of his duties, while some Neapolitan nobles resented his presence. Andrew admired Joanna's intelligence, but often felt torn between his family's demands and the needs of Naples. One night, after a long council meeting, Andrew found Joanna in the gardens, gazing at the moonlit city. "Do you not grow weary?" he asked softly. Joanna shook her head. "Weary? Perhaps. But a queen cannot show weakness. And Naples needs strength now more than ever." Andrew sighed. "I fear my family's impatience will bring disaster." Joanna took his hand. "Then we must face it together. A kingdom does not bend to fear, it bends to courage." It was in that moment that Andrew began to understand the depth of Joanna's resolve. She was not just a bride, she was a queen in training, already learning to navigate the treacherous waters of power. First signs of danger. Despite their careful planning, danger was never far. One morning, a messenger arrived from Hungary with a sealed letter. Joanna broke the seal and read, "Prince Andrew must obey his family. Naples must remain under Hungarian influence. Any deviation will be met with consequences." The letter was polite in words but threatening in tone. Joanna felt a chill. She knew that this was just the beginning, that foreign ambitions, rival claims, and court intrigues would follow them wherever they went. She shared the letter with Andrew, who looked troubled. "I will speak with them," he said. Joanna shook her head. "No. Speak carefully. Your words carry weight, but they must not weaken our position. We must show unity, or they will exploit every fissure." Her wisdom at such a young age surprised even Andrew. For the first time, he truly saw her as more than a bride or a princess. She was a ruler in her own right, fierce, intelligent, and unyielding. A glimpse of the future tragedy. Though their love was growing, shadows stretched across their days. The court was alive with gossip, whispers of alliances, threats from distant Hungary, and subtle undermining of Andrew's authority. Joanna sensed that the palace, once a place of childhood wonder, would soon become a place of peril. She spent nights staring at the stars, imagining the challenges ahead. In her heart, she understood that happiness would be fleeting. Naples would demand sacrifices, and power would exact its price. Even Andrew, whom she trusted, could not shield her from the storms that were already forming on the horizon. And so, Joanna, the young Queen of Naples, stood on the threshold of her destiny. Beautiful, intelligent, and determined, she had survived childhood, learned the ways of the court, and claimed her place beside a husband she respected. Yet fate, as always, had other plans, for the shadow of tragedy had begun to fall over Naples. And soon the kingdom would be forced to witness betrayal, murder, and a queen who must rise from the ashes of her own life to claim her crown. The murder of Andrew and the rise of the queen. The year was 1345, and Naples had grown accustomed to the presence of its young queen, Joanna. Her beauty, intelligence, and grace were admired throughout the kingdom, but admiration in Naples always came with envy. Courtiers whispered in the shadows. Foreign envoys watched every move. And the weight of history pressed heavily on the young queen's shoulders. Joanna had begun to learn the harsh truth. A throne is not a place of comfort, it is a battlefield. Every smile could hide betrayal. Every gesture could be twisted. Every friend could be an enemy in disguise. Andrew, though handsome and courageous, could not fully grasp the subtleties of Neapolitan politics. He was brave in battle, steadfast in loyalty, but gentle in heart. Joanna admired him, loved him even, yet she understood that his foreign upbringing left him vulnerable to the machinations of Naples' most cunning nobles. The growing tension. Tensions between Naples and Hungary were constant. Andrew's family demanded influence, asserting claims over policies, marriages, and appointments. Some Neapolitan lords resented Andrew, seeing the young prince as a foreign invader who threatened their power. They whispered of weakening his influence, of removing him entirely if the opportunity arose. Joanna felt the pressure acutely. She had learned to navigate these intrigues, but now her husband's life was on the line. Courtiers approached her with veiled warnings. One of her most trusted advisers, Giacomo, leaned close one evening in the quiet of her chamber. "Your Majesty, there are those who would see Prince Andrew removed. They speak in whispers, but their intentions are deadly clear." Joanna's eyes hardened. "Then we must act carefully, Giacomo. One wrong move and both our lives will be in danger." The Queen had learned that in Naples, danger often wore the mask of friendship. The night of murder. It was a night that would be remembered in history, a night when the palace that had once seemed safe became a house of terror. Andrew was walking in the private gardens, enjoying a cool spring evening. The stars reflected on the marble fountains, and the air carried the fragrance of roses and jasmine. Suddenly, shadows moved among the trees. Men cloaked in black approached silently. Andrew, brave but unsuspecting, reached for his sword. "Who goes there?" he demanded, voice echoing in the night. No reply came. Before he could defend himself, hands grabbed him from behind. Daggers flashed in the dim moonlight. The struggle was brief, swift, and merciless. Andrew fell, his life extinguished before anyone could intervene. By the time Joanna was informed, the palace was in chaos. Guards ran through corridors, shouting orders. Nobles whispered in corners, some with shock, some with grim satisfaction. Joanna, upon hearing the news, did not cry immediately. Her face remained calm, her mind racing. She understood one undeniable truth: this was no accident. Andrew had been murdered, and the culprits were among them. The trial and accusations. King Robert, Joanna's grandfather, demanded an investigation. Hungary demanded justice. Naples demanded answers. The palace became a courtroom, with suspicion hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Joanna, now widowed at barely 20, was thrust into the eye of the storm. Accusations flew like arrows. Some claimed Joanna had orchestrated the murder to remove her husband and secure power. Others suggested that Hungarian nobles had acted out of jealousy or fear. Every gesture she made, every tear shed, was analyzed, twisted, and reported. The young queen faced her first test in public scrutiny. She had to defend herself, assert her innocence, and maintain her authority, all while grieving a husband she had come to respect and love. She stood in the royal hall, eyes steady, voice calm. "I did not harm Prince Andrew. My loyalty, my duty, and my heart remain with Naples. I will uncover the truth, and justice will be served." Her words silenced the murmurs, but Joanna knew the murmurs would return. Naples was a kingdom where loyalty was bought, betrayal was common, and truth was often a weapon in disguise. Joanna's early political maneuvers. In the weeks following Andrew's death, Joanna began to assert herself as more than a grieving widow. She met secretly with loyal nobles, advisors, and the city's wealthiest merchants. Plans were drawn, alliances were formed, and strategies were devised. Joanna realized that power in Naples was fragile. She could either be swept aside or claim it for herself. And she had decided she would not be swept aside. One night, as she walked the moonlit terraces of the palace, Giacomo approached. "Your Majesty, the city whispers that you might rule alone." Joanna turned, her eyes reflecting the stars. "I will rule, and I will ensure that Andrew's death does not destroy Naples. The throne will not fall into the hands of those who conspire in the dark." Her resolve was clear. Joanna was no longer a child, no longer a bride, no longer merely a queen in name. She was becoming a ruler in her own right, a woman who understood that power demanded courage, cunning, and sacrifice, foreshadowing the future. Even as Joanna navigated the immediate crisis, shadows loomed. Families loyal to Hungary plotted revenge. Neapolitan nobles tested her patience and authority. The Pope watched silently, weighing the kingdom's future against political advantage. Joanna's life had changed forever. In the short span of weeks, she had gone from bride to widow, from admired princess to a queen surrounded by enemies. The palace, once a place of music and laughter, had become a battleground of suspicion, fear, and ambition. Yet, in the face of tragedy, Joanna's strength grew. She learned to listen, to observe, and to act with precision. She understood that the crown demanded sacrifices, and that every action, every word, every decision could mean life or death. By the time the first anniversary of Andrew's death approached, Joanna was no longer just the queen's widow. She had become the ruler Naples needed, intelligent, cautious, and relentless in her pursuit of justice. And though the shadows of betrayal had begun, Joanna would face them with the courage that history would remember. Love, power, and the rise of a queen. The years after Andrew's death were a time of uncertainty and change for Naples. The city had survived political upheaval before, but now the palace itself seemed to hold its breath. Joanna, still young, faced enemies both within her court and beyond its walls. She had mourned her husband, but she knew that mourning could not protect her kingdom. Action, strategy, and foresight were required now. The introduction of Louis of Taranto. Amid the turmoil, a man entered Joanna's life who would shape her destiny. Louis of Taranto, a distant relative and nobleman of considerable skill and ambition. Tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to see through pretense, he arrived in Naples under the pretense of alliance and loyalty. At first, Joanna observed him with caution. She had learned that charm often hid ambition. The first time they met, in the grand hall with tapestries depicting Naples' victories over past invaders, Louis bowed formally. "Your Majesty," he said, voice smooth but confident, I am honored to serve you and Naples. Joanna's eyes, always alert, studied him carefully. We are surrounded by those who claim loyalty, she replied. Your actions will speak louder than words, Lord Louis. For months, he proved himself, loyal in council, daring in battle, and unexpectedly attentive to the Queen herself. Joanna, despite her grief and caution, began to see a man who could be both an ally and companion. But in Naples, love was never separate from politics. Every affection could be weaponized. Court intrigues and alliances. The palace, however, was a nest of vipers. Nobles who had whispered against Andrew now tested Joanna's patience. Some resented her authority, others sought to marry into power. Louis proved invaluable in navigating these treacherous waters. Together, Joanna and Louis began attending private councils, listening carefully to reports of trade, rebellion, and foreign threats. Joanna's intelligence impressed Louis, while her decisiveness earned the respect of even the most skeptical nobles. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens under the soft glow of lanterns, Louis whispered, Your Majesty, you do not see the danger in these smiles, but I do. Let me stand with you. Joanna looked up at him, eyes wary but curious. Stand with me, yes, but never above me. Naples answers to no one but its queen. Louis smiled, understanding her meaning. He was a partner, not a master. And for the first time since Andrew's death, Joanna allowed herself to feel the faintest stirrings of trust, and perhaps affection. The marriage of power. Eventually, political necessity and growing closeness led Joanna and Louis to marry. Their wedding was simpler than her first, but no less significant. The union was both a consolidation of power and a personal bond. The people of Naples watched with mixed emotions, some hopeful that the Queen would secure the kingdom, others suspicious of Louis' intentions. Joanna, ever cautious, understood the delicate balance. She ruled with grace, but Louis' presence allowed her to display strength she could not achieve alone. They were allies in a kingdom where trust was rare, and danger was constant. Love and complications. Even with love entering her life, Joanna remained vigilant. Courtiers whispered jealousies, Hungarian interests lingered in the shadows, and Naples itself was restless. Louis admired her intelligence, her decisiveness, and her unyielding will, but he also understood the loneliness of the Queen's position. One night, as they dined quietly in the palace, Louis said, Joanna, your courage frightens me sometimes. Yet, it is the same courage that inspires loyalty. Joanna reached across the table, her hand brushing his. And yet, courage without vigilance is nothing. I must protect Naples, Louis, even from those I love. The tension between personal desire and political necessity was constant. Joanna learned to smile while calculating, to speak gently while observing loyalties, and to show affection while maintaining her authority. It was a delicate dance, one she had mastered quickly. Enemies and betrayals. As months turned into years, whispers of betrayal never ceased. Some nobles conspired openly, others acted behind veiled smiles. Joanna and Louis faced threats of rebellion, rival claims, and plots from foreign powers. The shadow of Andrew's murder still haunted the palace. It reminded everyone that even a prince could die unexpectedly. Joanna's strategy was meticulous. She identified allies, rewarded loyalty, and punished deceit quietly but effectively. Louis supported her every step of the way, providing strength in battle and diplomacy alike. Together, they began consolidating power, ensuring that Naples would remain under Joanna's command. and that any who challenged her would think twice. A queen in full command. By the time Joanna entered her 30s, she had transformed from a young, cautious girl into a forceful and respected ruler. Her marriage to Louis had strengthened her position, but more importantly, it had refined her understanding of Naples' complex political landscape. She presided over councils, managed disputes among nobles, and addressed foreign ambassadors with authority and tact. Naples prospered under her rule, trade flourished, arts and education were encouraged, and the streets were patrolled to ensure safety. Yet beneath the surface, danger never slept. Joanna had learned the hard truth: power is never given, it is taken, maintained, and defended constantly. And she was determined to defend it with every ounce of her being. Foreshadowing the final struggle. Even as Joanna ruled wisely, the seeds of future betrayal were sown. Charles of Durazzo, her ambitious cousin, watched from afar. Foreign powers observed, waiting for any sign of weakness. And while Joanna had survived the loss of Andrew and navigated a treacherous marriage, the ultimate test of her courage and cunning had yet to come. She walked the palace terraces at night, lantern in hand, overlooking the sea. The wind carried both the scent of orange blossoms and the whispers of a kingdom that demanded everything from its queen. Joanna's heart was steady. Her mind was sharp. Her will was unbreakable. And she knew that Naples would witness her greatest victories and her darkest trials in the years to come: betrayal, loss, and the maturing of a queen. By the time Joanna entered the mid-30s, Naples was a kingdom of contrasts. Its streets were filled with music, merchants, and laughter, but within the palace walls, power struggles simmered like a slow-burning fire. Joanna, now seasoned by tragedy and experience, had become a ruler both admired and feared. She was no longer the young bride of Andrew nor the cautious queen learning from Louis. She was the sovereign force behind Naples' throne. The threat of Charles of Durazzo. Among those who watched her most closely was Charles of Durazzo, her ambitious cousin. His eyes, sharp and calculating, always lingered on the crown she wore with pride. He had waited patiently, observing Joanna's every move, quietly building alliances with those dissatisfied by her rule. Charles believed Joanna's rule was fragile. He underestimated her resilience, her intelligence, and her ability to navigate the treacherous world of Naples politics. But he would soon learn that a queen who had survived betrayal, murder, and the loss of her first husband would not bow easily. The death of Louis of Taranto. Louis, Joanna's trusted husband and partner, had provided stability for years. Together, they had strengthened Naples, ensured loyalty among the nobles, and fended off foreign threats. But fate, as always, was cruel. One fateful evening, Louis fell gravely ill. The palace physicians, despite their skill, could not save him. Joanna sat by his bedside, holding his hand as his life slipped away. "Do not fear, my love," a Louis whispered weakly. "You are stronger than any crown, stronger than me." Joanna's tears fell silently. Her heart ached, but her mind remained clear. She knew that grief, however deep, could not paralyze her. Naples depended on her, and the throne demanded vigilance. Louis' death marked another turning point in Joanna's life. She was once again alone, but not powerless. She would channel her grief into strength, ensuring that her enemies would never see her falter. Political maneuvers and consolidation of power. With Louis gone, Joanna became the sole ruler of Naples. Her strategies became sharper, her decisions bolder. She convened councils, reassessed alliances, and punished disloyal nobles discreetly but effectively. Joanna's enemies began to realize that she was no ordinary queen. She was intelligent, ruthless when necessary, and unyielding in her pursuit of justice. Those who attempted to undermine her found themselves isolated, financially weakened, or quietly removed from positions of influence. Her presence was commanding. When she entered a room, courtiers straightened, ambassadors took note, and even foreign envoys tread carefully. Joanna had mastered the art of power, the delicate balance of fear and respect. Love, diplomacy, and strategy. Despite the loss of Louis, Joanna remained capable of personal warmth and diplomacy. She maintained friendships, nurtured alliances, and occasionally allowed herself brief moments of private affection. Yet she never allowed love to compromise her rule. Joanna had learned the hard way that the crown demanded sacrifice. She ruled Naples not just as a sovereign but as a guardian of her people, fully aware that every decision carried weight far beyond her own life. Betrayal from within. Even with her vigilance, betrayal always lurked close. Certain nobles, jealous of Joanna's power and fearful of her intelligence, plotted in secret. Rumors of conspiracy reached her ears, but she dealt with them strategically. Joanna did not confront enemies recklessly. She waited, observed, and acted decisively when the time was right. One evening, she discovered a plot to assassinate her during a council meeting. Using cunning, she turned the conspirators against each other, ensuring their plans failed without revealing her knowledge. This episode only strengthened her reputation as a queen who could see through deceit and punish without mercy. The mature rule of Joanna. Years of loss, betrayal, and intrigue had honed Joanna into a ruler of exceptional skill. She became a patron of the arts, a promoter of education, and a skilled diplomat, all while maintaining the authority and respect demanded by her crown. Naples prospered under her reign. Trade flourished, artists and scholars were supported, and the city became a beacon of culture in Italy. Yet Joanna never forgot the lessons of her youth, the treachery of courtiers, the dangers of ambition, and the fragility of life. She governed not only with intelligence, but with an unshakable sense of justice. Those who served Naples faithfully were rewarded, those who betrayed it faced swift consequences. Her rule was marked by strength, wisdom, and a cautious generosity that inspired both loyalty and fear. Foreshadowing the final struggles. As Joanna entered her later years, the shadows of her past, Andrew's murder, Louis' death, and the continuous plotting of her enemies remained ever present. Charles of Durazzo and other ambitious nobles continued to scheme, hoping for an opportunity to seize power. But Joanna had learned the greatest lesson of all. Power is not simply held, it is defended, shaped, and wielded with unwavering resolve. She had faced loss, betrayal, and near-death experiences, yet each trial had strengthened her resolve. By now, Joanna was no longer just the young bride of Naples. She was a queen in her own right, wise, powerful, and unafraid of the shadows that sought to consume her, and the stage was set for the final acts of her reign, where love, betrayal, and political genius would collide in a drama that would echo through history. Final betrayal, trials, and the legacy of a queen. By the time Joanna entered the final years of her reign, Naples had become a city that reflected her strength and vision. Its streets bustled with merchants and artists, its palaces gleamed under the Mediterranean sun, and its people had learned to respect, even fear, the queen who ruled with intelligence and resolve. Yet, the shadows of the past never left her. The death of Andrew, the loss of Louis, and the constant plotting of nobles reminded her that a crown was never safe, no matter how firm the grip. Joanna had survived countless betrayals, but now, her greatest challenge approached. Charles of Durazzo strikes. Charles of Durazzo, her ambitious cousin, had spent years waiting for a moment to strike. Patient, calculating, and cruel, he had gathered allies both within Naples and abroad. Whispers of revolt and assassination plans reached Joanna's ears, but she remained calm. She understood that fear is a weapon, but wisdom is a shield. Every council meeting, every exchange with nobles, was observed carefully. Joanna had learned to read the true intentions behind smiles and gestures. And now, Charles was testing her. One morning, envoys arrived from Durazzo, bearing letters filled with both threats and promises. Charles claimed to seek unity, but Joanna could see the trap hidden between the lines. She called her council immediately and revealed the plot she had uncovered. Neapolitan loyalty must never waver. Those who betray the crown will face consequences. Her words carried weight. Fear and respect intertwined in the eyes of the courtiers. Charles had underestimated Joanna. Intrigue, treachery, and survival. The palace became a theatre of subtle war. Every noble acted with caution. Every adviser was tested for loyalty. Joanna moved like a chess master, placing pieces carefully, anticipating moves, and turning enemies against one another. There were nights when she walked the palace corridors alone, listening to distant whispers, observing shadows, and thinking through strategies. Even when she dined with allies, her eyes were never idle. She had learned that a queen must always see the full battlefield, visible and hidden. The betrayal that shook Naples. Despite her vigilance, betrayal came from the most unexpected quarters. Some nobles, once loyal, were swayed by promises of power and wealth from Charles. They plotted to assassinate Joanna, intending to remove her and place Durazzo on the throne. Joanna, ever perceptive, discovered the plot through careful observation and a network of loyal servants. She acted decisively. During a council meeting, she subtly revealed evidence of disloyalty, turning conspirators against one another without spilling blood unnecessarily. The palace trembled with tension, but Joanna's authority was reaffirmed. Her enemies realized that she was not just a queen, they were facing a force of intelligence and will unmatched in Naples' history. Joanna's wisdom and diplomacy. Even in the midst of danger, Joanna did not abandon diplomacy. She negotiated with foreign powers, balanced internal factions, and maintained the stability of Naples. Her ability to combine cunning, courage, and compassion made her respected even by those who feared her. She also became a patron of arts and education. Scholars, poets, and artists thrived under her reign. She encouraged learning, supported the creation of beautiful works, and ensured that Naples became a cultural hub, blending the grandeur of power with the grace of knowledge. The final years of rule. As Joanna grew older, her reputation spread across Europe. She was known as a ruler who had survived murder, betrayal, and loss, yet emerged stronger every time. Her life had been shaped by tragedy, but she transformed pain into strategy, grief into wisdom, and loss into determination. Even as she faced external threats, from Charles of Durazzo to foreign kings, Joanna remained unshaken. Her decisions were deliberate, her commands firm, and her vision for Naples clear. She had learned that ruling a kingdom was not about mercy alone, nor about fear alone. It was about balance, foresight, and the courage to act decisively. Legacy of a Queen. Joanna's reign left a lasting mark on Naples. Her courage inspired loyalty, her intelligence commanded respect, and her vision strengthened the kingdom. Though history remembered the tragedy of her life, the deaths, betrayals, and political intrigues, it also remembered the queen who refused to bow to fate. She had transformed Naples into a city of culture, learning, and resilience. She had survived murder attempts, navigated complex political landscapes, and faced the relentless ambitions of her enemies. Most importantly, she had done so with the heart of a ruler, the mind of a strategist, and the soul of a survivor. As Joanna walked the terraces of her palace in her later years, looking over the Tyrrhenian Sea, she knew that she had lived not for herself, but for the crown and the kingdom she loved. She had endured everything: a bride, a widow, a wife, and finally, a sovereign queen. Her story was one of triumph over tragedy, intelligence over deceit, and courage over fear. Naples had witnessed her rise, her struggles, and her triumphs. And history would remember Joanna, not only as a queen but as a legend. Listen, my dear, today I am going to tell you the story of a great king, Henry VIII, who was one of the most famous and powerful kings of England. Henry was born on June 28, 1491, at Greenwich Palace, in the home of a mighty king. His father, Henry VII, was the founder of the Tudor dynasty, and young Henry's childhood passed among the glittering walls of the palace and the lush green gardens. From a very young age, Henry was intelligent and full of energy. He loved music, dancing, horse riding, and sports. He would roam the palace corridors on his horse, impressing his teachers with his skills. Every day, his confidence and curiosity grew. Every corner of the palace seemed alive with his dreams and ambitions. Henry's childhood days were always full of adventure. Mornings spent horse riding and training, followed by reading and practicing languages, and evenings filled with music and dancing. Sometimes he would practice secretly in the courtyard, challenging himself, trying to perfect his skills. His eyes always sparkled with dreams, and his heart was full of ambition and curiosity. When Henry turned 17, after the death of his father, he became the King of England. Imagine, my dear, a young boy carrying the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders. Henry's enthusiasm and ambition were both high. Every day, the palace echoed with music and celebrations, yet the king's mind was not only on pleasure but on strengthening and protecting his kingdom. He began to learn diplomacy and politics and gradually started organizing England's political and military power. Every decision, every meeting, every hunting expedition involved both his mind and heart working together. Then, a beautiful princess entered Henry's life, Catherine of Aragon, a princess from Spain. Their marriage was arranged as a political alliance, and at first, they were very happy together. Catherine's love and elegance touched Henry's heart. They had a daughter, Mary, and a son, Prince Henry, who sadly died in childhood. The king longed for a male heir to secure his kingdom and dynasty, but he could not have one with Catherine. This caused him sadness, and a complex mix of duty and personal desire weighed on his heart. Under the moonlit palace skies, they would watch the sunset together, yet the king carried a quiet sadness in his heart. Every night, when he sat alone in his chambers, he thought about his dreams and worries, sometimes trying to forget them through his love for horse riding and hunting. Every day of Henry's life was a mixture of emotions and ambitions. Sometimes, he would sit by the window in his chambers, watching the gardens and horses, thinking about how to balance his life and kingdom. Sometimes, he felt joy and excitement in hunting and tournaments, and other times, he felt sorrow over the lack of a male heir. His heart and mind were always working together, a complex combination where duty and personal desire were constantly in play. Soon after, another woman entered Henry's life, Anne Boleyn, and Henry's heart beat faster at her presence. Anne was intelligent and strong-willed, and every word and smile of hers stirred his emotions. But Anne was not only love. She challenged the king to rethink his life and faith. Henry decided to break away from the Pope's authority and create his own Church of England, so that he could make decisions about his marriage and personal life himself. He had a daughter with Anne, Elizabeth, who would later become one of England's greatest queens. But due to political and personal tensions, Anne Boleyn was executed in 1536. In the palace halls, plotting, secret plans of ministers and nobles, and the king's emotions mixed together. Henry's heart beat fast, and dreams for Elizabeth's future were forming in his mind. Henry VIII married a total of 6 times. First was Catherine of Aragon, whom he divorced. Second was Anne Boleyn, who was executed. Third was Jane Seymour, who gave him his male heir, Edward VI. Fourth was Anne of Cleves, whom he married for political reasons and then divorced. Fifth was Catherine Howard, who also faced execution. And the last was Catherine Parr, Who survived him? Behind each marriage was a mix of political and personal motives, and Henry's health and weight gradually declined over time. Henry VIII strengthened England's military and naval power. Control over taxes and lands came under the crown. Religious reforms permanently changed the faith of England, from Catholic to Anglican. Education and art flourished under his reign. In every painting, every palace, and every lore, Henry's thought and ambition could be felt. In the grand halls, feasts, tournaments, and hunting expeditions, the presence of Henry was felt everywhere. Even as he grew older and his health declined, his ambition and curiosity never faded. He continued to work on policies and reforms with his ministers and advisors. His strategy and intelligence were seen in wars and foreign alliances. His decisions forever changed England's history. Imagine, my dear, a king who once played as a small child in the palace gardens now held the fate of an entire kingdom in his hands. Finally, Henry VIII passed away on January 28, 1547, at the age of 55. After him, Edward VI, Mary, and Elizabeth took over the kingdom. The legacy of Henry VIII has been remembered forever. A story of a young boy who began in the palace gardens and became a king whose decisions changed the religion and politics of England forever. His reign, achievements, failures, and personal struggles will always live on as a story in history.